Alrighty folks, here he is, the Death Guard Marine. New playlist, first video. If you want to keep up with all of the videos for this Marine, don't forget to hit that subscribe button, and right next to it, hit the bell button and you won't miss an upload. This is the first playlist I'm doing for a specific model, and it's the first playlist that I'm trying to teach you how I paint a specific model. So feel free, drop your comments below whether you like it or not. Feel free, hit the like button as well. After the video there are plenty of links at the bottom that you can check out at your leisure, but let's get cracking on this Death Guard Plague Marine. Alright, come on. So we're going to get started with this Plague Marine. He's built and primed. You can check those videos out, how to prime a miniature in priming a miniature video. We're going to start with the base coat of Death Guard Green, and I'm going to use a fairly old brush. It's a nice big one. Doesn't need to be an old brush, but you know, I'm not going to be particularly careful with the brush. And I give the paint a nice big shake. And for these videos I need to be painting as comfortably as possible, so I'm going to start using my wet palette for these. The palette that you choose, again, I've said so many times in the past, is such a personal choice. I wouldn't dream of telling you that you had to use a wet palette. It's just that this is the way that I find the best way for me to paint. I'm going to give the paint a little bit of a thin. Normally on a wet palette I wouldn't need to, but I just kind of need to because it's running out of water. But anyway, we're just going to give this a nice coat of Death Guard Green. It doesn't cover properly or completely because it's only the first coat. So as always, you know, nice and smooth, and leave it to dry. And once it's dry, we can re-wet the paint, and we can come in again for another pass. Nice and simply, we're just doing 2 coats of Death Guard Green, and that's that. And we're just going to pop it down to dry, and we can then move on to the next stage. And once it's dry, such as this, we're going to go on to Agrax Earthshade. This is going to give us a nice shade, and we use Agrax Earthshade because it's quite a dirty, kind of brown, kind of earthy look, and Plague Marines are dirty, so that's what we're going to do. I'm still using the same brush that I used to base coat, because I'm going over the entire model. We're not recess washing these. We want him to have a really nice dirty look all over, so he's getting a all over wash. The wash will still go to the recesses, but as you see here, I'm just going around the model, just picking out with the brush all of the pools of wash. We don't want it to settle there, and there we go. If we have it pooling, it starts to look a bit funny, so we take the pools away, and there he is, nice and washed. And so we're going to come in with the dry paint from Citadel, Nurgling Green. Don't forget, we need to kitchen roll to do some dry brushing. There is a dry brushing video on my channel, and we're just going to grab a little bit on the brush and wipe most of it off, as always. You do need to make sure it's reasonably empty, to be honest. You don't want to have this Nurgling Green kind of streaking across the flat areas. It kind of ruins the effect. So nice and gently across the grain, or against the grain, we're just going to highlight the model up. And this Nurgling Green is quite nice. It's not too overpowering against the Death Guard Green. They're kind of in the same kind of khaki kind of colours, so they kind of fit well together to get a really nice highlight going on this green. And we go over the entire model. This is only the first step of the entire model, so there's no other paints to get ruined. And as you can see, he's nicely highlighted there. All of the edges and ridges and so on have been nicely highlighted. Pull it nice and close. You see, even those around those boils and pustules and all sorts of things have a really nice highlight to the edge of it. and even the divots in the armour. And that's because we didn't have much paint on the brush, so it wasn't depositing along all the flat edges, it was just getting caught on those edges. And now that we've highlighted the green, we're going to go into the bronze or the brass of this Death Guard Marine. We're using Balthazar Gold, and we need to give it a really good shake. Metallics always need a good shake, and you can see here it's supposedly gold, but it looks more of a brass. But you know, whatever, it works for this what we're doing. So pop some on your palette of whatever it is you're using, and we need to give it a bit of a thin as well. And so we can use this. I'm going to one of my Series 7 brushes now. Again, I'm not going to insist that you go out and buy expensive brushes. The important thing here is I'm using a brush that I can control, and just there you saw I just wiped off a little bit of water from the metal of the brush. I don't want that running down the end of the brush onto the model, otherwise it will just thin whatever's on the model and it will just flood and it will make a mess. But I'm using a brush that I'm particularly comfortable with, and we are going around all of the trimmings. You can see around the leg there and around the just at the bottom of the belly. We're just going around all of this trim that this model has. We're going around the shoulder guards here. We're making sure we get all of the brass painted in nice and carefully. You do not want to go onto the green on this. We do need to be careful, which is why it's important to use a brush that you are comfortable using. If you can get a nice sharp point on a 50p brush, feel free to use it. It's just that the way I paint, I am comfortable using a Series 7, so that's why I'm using it. And we just go around and we've picked out all of those brass details there, and we picked out all the little flies, those little ball things on the back there in brass, all the trimming and his eyes. I've just picked them out in brass. And once that's dry, we can then I'm going to the Citadel starter brush, because we're going to highlight using this dry paint Golden Griffin. I'm using a paint brush rather than a dry brush, which, you know, they're the same sort of thing. I just need the control of the dry brush. We're not, unlike when we did the green, I'm not going to be throwing this gold all over the model. I don't want to hit the gold onto this Golden Griffin onto the green. So I'm using a paintbrush as a dry brush. This will trash your brushes, so you don't want to do this with your best brushes. But we're using the same dry brush technique, as in we're getting the paint on the brush, we're wiping most of it off, and we're just going along the edges of all the brass. It's going to highlight the brass, but we have much more control over it because we're using a much smaller brush. It doesn't look like it's done a lot, just because, you know, they're both metallic paints. Only if you look carefully, it does look shinier on the edges. And that there is Reikland Flesh Shade. We don't need to wait for the dry paint to dry, because essentially it already is. So I'm just going to nip in and I'm going to get my Series 7 brush again, because this time we're still going to wash the entire area of brass. We're not recess washing, but again we need to control. So, you know, it's not difficult, you're just painting over the brass with a brush that you're comfortable using. Essentially this is base coating with a shade paint. It's not difficult, you just want the control. But we need that to dry, and then once it's dry, you can see we now have a nice shade all over that brass, and then we can move on to the next step. Once it's dry, of course. We move these paints out of the way, and we're coming in for the final step, which is Agrax Earthshade. At the minute, it's kind of looking pretty much like GW would paint them, but I want to go that one step further and really dirty these models down. So once again, go over the entire model, or at least everything that you've painted so far, with Agrex Earthshade. And again, we need to make sure that we pick up all of the bits that have pulled, otherwise it's going to look unsightly, which, you know, for a Nurgle Marine it's, you know, maybe not quite such a bad thing. But I'm just going to go around and I'm just going to pick out all of those puddles of wash. And if needs be, you can redistribute the wash just to thin it out a little bit if it's puddled. And then we have a nice dry marine that looks rather disgusting. But I kind of like this look. He is nice and grungy, and he is now ready for the next video. The next part of the video, or the next part of the series, I should say. And so that is the armor done. I do like the this slightly, is it gonna, it's not even gonna focus, is it? I do like that slightly darker green that I've got here as opposed to Games Workshop. I mean, Games Workshop, I pretty much do follow the Games Workshop way of doing it, just adding that extra Agrex Earthshade wash at the end. I kind of like it. It looks a bit more dingy, a little bit more dirty. Admittedly, just before doing the Agrex wash on the armor, I would do the metallics as well. But that's in the next video, and I'll show you how to do some fairly grungy metallics, which pretty much, again, I followed the Citadel Painting App's recipe for doing that, but that'll be in the next video. But for now, I'll just say, you know, if you do like this video and you like what I'm doing, hit the thumbs up button. You know, it lets me know that I'm doing a good job. Don't forget to subscribe if you want to watch all of them, and hit the bell button so you get notified when I upload, so that you don't miss a single video of mine. And of course, like I said earlier, the links of my Facebook, Instagram, all my social media is in the description below. And if you want to help support the channel, to which I could then maybe start painting some bigger and better models that I might not necessarily would have bought for myself, but you guys want to see at home, feel free to have a look at the Patreon from as little as $1 a month. But that is entirely up to you. You can peruse all of those at your leisure. So I say thank you for watching this one. I'll catch you in the next one. Ta-ra.